Hello, hello. So this is lesson 7 of the integer unit. The purpose of this lesson is to discuss the rules of how to multiply integers. So we're going to be talking about multiplying positive and negative numbers today. And we start out with a visual in example 1. The purpose of having this grid here is to hopefully look for a pattern among the products that you see. And what we'll do is we'll start with quadrant 1 and we'll make our way around the grid. So quadrant 1 is focusing on a specific type of product. We're looking at multiplying a positive number times a positive number. So we're starting with something that we're all familiar with. So for example, if I were to multiply 1 times 1, the answer would be 1. And by the way, the arrows are purely drawn so that you can see what I'm looking at. I would not draw the arrows on my notes. So that's just as a visual because I'm talking through a video. So the product is what's going to go inside of each of those boxes. So if I were to continue that process, 1 times 2, that's equal to 2. And as you can see, the arrows make this look really messy. So I'm not going to continue drawing the arrows, but I wanted you to understand where I was looking when I was deciding what numbers were being multiplied. So you're looking at this gray section right here. So right here, there are numbers written in a column vertically, up and down. And there's also numbers that are highlighted in gray horizontally, or in other words, left to right. And those are the numbers that you're looking at to decide what gets multiplied for each of those boxes. So I'm going to have you pause the video so that you can fill out the rest of quadrant 1 because you're not going to need my help with that. And that way I can fill out the quadrant and make it look a little bit cleaner for you. So pause the video and finish finding the products of quadrant 1. Okay, welcome back. So at this point, I've finished filling out quadrant 1. Hopefully you have the same numbers there as well. Just quickly check your paper, compare that to mine. As long as everything looks good, we can move on to quadrant 2. So quadrant 2 is focusing on a different type of product. So in the last one, quadrant 1, we were looking at multiplying a positive number times a positive number. Quadrant 2 is our first point where we're looking at something that we haven't done before, and that is multiplying a negative number times a positive number. So if we did -1 times +1, our answer is going to be -1. -2 times -1, that gives us -2. -3 times 1 is -3. -4 times 1 is -4. Now you may be wondering, wait, how do we know this? And again, I have this product set up in a grid so that you can look for a pattern. Now, you sort of have to disregard the gray, the numbers that are highlighted in gray, but if you look at the numbers that I'm highlighting in pink here, you'll notice that there is a pattern. So aside from missing 0, which would be there if we didn't have the gray numbers there, we would have a pattern, right? So starting in quadrant 1, let me get my pen so you can see where I'm looking. So starting in quadrant 1, if we start here and go to the left, we're just counting down. 4, 3, 2, 1. Technically, this would be 0. -1, -2, -3, -4. So what you'll notice is as you're filling out your quadrants, you're going to start seeing patterns with your products. So once again, I'll have you do the best that you can to fill out quadrant 2. Now, if the patterns don't seem obvious yet, then just wait for me to fill this out and then you can copy my notes as well. But I do think that it's worth attempting it on your own. You never know what you're capable of until you've at least tried it yourself. And I think you'll be impressed with what you can figure out without my help. All right. So pause the video and I'm going to fill out quadrant 2. Okay, welcome back. So at this point, I've filled out quadrant 2. So an observation that you can make is that in quadrant 2, all of those products are going to be negative. In quadrant 1, all of our products were positive. So something that we can take away from this is when we multiply a negative number, one negative number times one positive number, our product, our final answer is going to be negative. So that's a relationship that will always be true, and that's going to be that will help us with future questions in our quadrant. But for now we have to move on to quadrant 3, and this is again a different scenario. So let's look at, I'm going to highlight this in purple this time. So quadrant 3 is down below here. This time we're going to be multiplying a negative number times a negative number. So -1 times -1, that is equal to 1. -2 times -1 is equal to +2. So again, you might be asking yourself, well, wait a minute, how do we know that that's true? Well, look at the pattern that we have followed in the other columns. All right. Oh, I forgot to fill one out. We said -1 times -2 is +2, right? So we'll finish filling that row out, and then I'll highlight. So -1 times -3 is +3. -1 times -4 is +4. Okay, now I can highlight so we can find that pattern that I was talking about. So I'm going to highlight just this column in orange here, looking up and down vertically. So again, if we look at this pattern, okay, starting up here at -4, if we count down -4, -3, -2, -1, this would be 0. If it was, the gray numbers are really large, but normally you would have we're missing a row, basically. But anyways, but if you continue the pattern, we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so again, we're going to see the same patterns arise that we saw when we were comparing quadrants 1 and quadrants 2. So now with that pattern observed, we can now finish filling out the quadrants or filling out the products in quadrant 3. So pause the video and I'll let you finish filling out those boxes. Okay, so at this point I've now finished filling out quadrant 3, and once again, we have something to observe here. When we multiply a negative number times a negative number, our product is always going to be positive. All right? So that is a rule that we will have to use in future problems when we just have a product without this grid in front of us. And now we can move on to the last quadrant that we haven't filled out yet. Now, quadrant 4 is here, highlighted in blue. We've already talked about these relationships. So at this point, we've figured out that a negative number times a positive number is going to have a negative product. So with that rule in mind, and using the patterns that we have already started, using our other quadrants 1 and 3 can help us finish those patterns, you can now fill out quadrant 4. So yes, all of these products in number 4, quadrant number 4, are going to be negative. So pause the video. I'm going to fill this out, and then I'll let you check your answers in just a moment so you guys can get started on that. Okay, welcome back. So at this point, we've finished filling out quadrant 4. So hopefully we were able to recognize some patterns. It's important to see the big picture. I don't want math to just be a bunch of rules for you and rules that you don't understand. These rules come from something. There was a mathematician at one point that saw that there was a pattern when he multiplied positive and negative numbers, and this is what came about. So that's where those rules came from, and this is what I want you to think about. Picture the grid when you're trying to remember those rules for multiplying integers. Now, if you take a look at the next page in your notes, there is an exercise here. I'm not going to go over exercise 1. Those are things that we've actually already answered, we've talked about, and it's just something that you need to formalize in words. However, I do want to go over the rules at the bottom of the page. So answer exercise 1 on your own, pause the video if you want, and then when you're done, you can continue playing and we can go over the rules. So take a moment, pause the video, finish exercise 1. And welcome back. So the rules, let's formalize this. the rules to multiply positive and negative numbers. This is true for integers, but it's true for really any number. So it doesn't necessarily have to be an integer for this to work. So to multiply signed numbers, multiply the absolute values of the numbers in order to determine if the product is positive or negative, follow the rules. Okay, so there's basically two scenarios that could happen here. So rule number one, if you have two numbers that are being multiplied that are both of the same signs. So we're focusing on the fact that it's two numbers multiplied that are the same sign. So that could mean that we're multiplying two positive numbers, or we could be multiplying two negative numbers. So if they have the same sign, then your product is always going to be positive. And we could use some examples here. So in the space provided, we could write 3 times 5 is equal to 15. So that's a positive product. And we could also say, hey, if I multiply two negative numbers, -2 times -4, that's going to give me positive 8. So in both of those examples, my products are going to be positive. Now in the other scenario, rule number 2, this is when we have two numbers that are being multiplied, but they're different signs. So opposite signs, meaning that you're going to have one number that's negative and one number that is positive. And the order does not matter. As long as you have two numbers that are different signs, that means that your product will always be negative. Okay, and we can model some examples here. -1 times positive 9 is equal to -9. Or we could say positive 5 times -2, that is equal to -10. So those are just a few examples. And there are more questions to practice those rules on the next page. So once you've finished writing those notes, you can move on to exercise 2. Try those on your own. I'm not going to go over the solutions to exercise 2 in this video, so please check your answer key on Schoology for the correct solutions to the rest of your notes. So good luck, and please do not be shy. Ask questions. There's always opportunity for explanation and more examples if it's needed. So good luck, as I said, and I'll talk to you later. Bye, guys.